It's July 16th, 2022. Last night was Friday. Rick Allen was out on the corner uh, and invited me to the local comedy show, which I don't enter unless there's invitation. And so he invited me. Um, it has been several weeks since I've last been invited. When I entered, the room had been changed. It had a different motif, a different design. Um, so I was there. It coincides with the episode, I think it's the third episode of season 4, so for 43rd Avenue. And season 4, episode 3, Annie's Follies. Westworld is acknowledging whatever they're acknowledging. And it, of course, is heirloomed somehow in with my real reality. As usual. It's easy for me to explain. It's hard for others to believe, apparently. So I was in the room. There was a comedian. I guess he would be the Bernard character of sorts. Perhaps not everybody would agree, but he is a version of this Bernard character from Westworld. His last name was Mason, I believe. The actual show, the comedy show, there was only 8 people in the audience, or so they referenced. It was taped by someone else on their device or their cell phone camera. Not of the audience, but of just the comedians for what was being presented. They had a backdrop of a brick wall. There were 3 I would say girls, but women within my age bracket that sat at a table, different table than myself. I sat alone, as usual. And then there was another couple that was there. We had to guess a number, so of course I go with 8. And then I went with 11, because I'm inside out, upside down. That wasn't it. And then I went with 12, obviously, for Brady Bunch. So they did acknowledge I was 12 in the room, because there was some dispute over who called it first with another lady who they gave 2 tickets to. But they kept acknowledging that I was 12, or I was the original 12, whatever. Again, I didn't need the 2 comedy tickets. It's a business, and there were 2 at that table, so whatever arrangement I have with Rick, who's very kind to me in the local area. So anyhow, so I was there. The way of being of the 3 at the table that were within my age bracket, but nothing like myself. It is, again, I'm in social observance of the way humanity behaves and interacts. I know I am not one of them. I've not conducted myself as such. One called herself a hospital administrator, and 2 called themselves nurses. Again, their interaction, their distraction, their disruption of the entire show was unbecoming. It was a horrendous social interaction for me, although I didn't interact. But again, it reminds me very much of being introduced to the Tiafrio family from Long Island, from where I come from. I come from an upper echelon, a quiet interaction with people from foreign and from local, and I even said it last night because they were speaking on this new thing where the new dating pool sends their unmasked genitals through the phone to one another in some, I don't want to know about it, I don't want to be part of it. I've been asked, I have denied them the entire time, but it's become this new social norm here in New York for some reason. And so they brought that up. It was very foul. I did notice a surveillance camera behind the comedian looking at the audience, so I knew I was on surveillance. And then the comedian had his own take on what was presented at the show for their own dissertation or deposition, I'm not quite sure. But the caliber of woman, the caliber of human, the caliber of social interaction, completely different between my own and what else is here in New York in some whatever. The three at the table would remind me more of Nora and her echelon of friends that I don't want anything to do with. I don't want a part of. I don't want to hang out with. I don't appreciate spending social time with them. And I definitely don't like going out in public with them because it's an embarrassment and it's a mark, I feel, on my reputation for having to be dragged into that level of whatever I'm not. But here we are doing work that seems to go unrecognized and unappreciated. So their foul language, their foul way of being, it's not who I am. It's not how I'm built. And it's not who I like being. Ever. Not even in like an actor's studio with a different form of or caliber of person. I don't like getting on that level. Just don't. It just feels wrong for me. It's not my life's mission. It's not. I'm RH negative. I'm in the 10%. I was somewhere between 5 to 3% in a relation to the 1%. And I had a 1% that was interested in me at some point. I'm just not quite sure how I got further into a 10% from his 1% position and how that ever was allowed to develop. So that's real world for me in this stage, in this fourth decade, third year. On the television between the Mason person who was the comedian who had the interaction with these American women, supposedly. I just stay silent. I'm just a silent observer from behind in a whatever, I don't really like this. I don't really want to be here. I don't like anything about my day when I wake up. I have not enjoyed a single piece of life. I have not lived a single piece of life. And I don't have my pairing, which means the world for me is broken. World is broken beyond just personal relations. They've withheld me in this area, whomever, for whatever reason, from being able to get to my 1% person, to have an honorable relationship journey and time, doing whatever work it was that his family was into and that I was to follow in his footsteps or by his side, and however that worked, without saying much. And so now I'm just looking at some of the Dieter pieces in a radiologically, they've enhanced their digital capabilities, their long distance telecasts. I'm looking at gigantic heat waves. I saw in the news they had a instance where a man was on the tarmac at an airport, and it was 100 degrees, like where, like right at level, but on the tarmac because of the reflective properties, so they claim. When they hit it with a heat thermometer at the foot level, distal from cephalic region, it became 126. So that's what's radiating up from the bottom, and the convection in the middle. And they even said it's like, it feels like being a baked potato in the center for convection, for working at that field or industry. All right, so now going back to the comedy show, that they also, somebody had in that comedy show as reference, it should be captured on film, a piece of paper they took out of their pocket and they folded it. And they even mentioned about the fact that we exist at something called linear time with the paper. It's mentioned in this episode 4. I'm sorry, season 4, episode 3 of Westworld. And of course, I'm in New York. In fact, I'm in New York, but I'm in Bayside Station, and they made like a huge thing out of this. There's like, he's like, I could be in like major, like Caroline's or all these Gotham comedy clubs, but here I am at the epitome of my career in Bayside. I'm like, if you only knew how world significance this little one-horse town was.
Something's changed. What is it?
The man last night, one of the comedians, which Rick said he found on YouTube. Again, he was a representative, let's say, of a relative of sorts to this Bernard character on this TV show. They'd be more in the familial category than I would be, just for language purposes.
Josh.
That's about where we are radiologically. The earth from the ground underneath the mantle or crust or terra firma that we stand upon is heating. There's some telescopic NASA level equipment out in deep space that takes a whole lot of photos. Not that any of the humans I've ever met can read any of them or even guess, like within a range of possibility that makes sense to me. But there's that. And there really is scorching not only of the earth, but the trees are just spontaneously combusting, it looks, or it appears, in the west within this United States of America territory at the same time. Now, for me, that one white horse in front of this Wild West town being Bayside, we're at Monahan's in the attic. I do appreciate, I've heard that some of the comedians, they do speak on the fact that they have addiction problems, that they have had in the past because of what their exposure has been in the New York area or life frame, and how their story or script has developed, that they have at times abused substance. However, they still perform comedy where there are temptations within the building, and they are able to overcome those temptations however they organize themselves. So for myself, when I enter this type of establishment or this type of setting, and they acknowledge that they're there and they've overcome these hurdles, it does not fall on deaf ears, that's for sure. Now, one might say that Bayside from 1800s to 1900s in this Wild West landscape, or of this one horse town, I'll be the one horse for the moment for this example. If you watch, Bernard walks from this Wild West concept and crosses something, some threshold, some mantle, into the modern visual spectrum world, which again goes between the imaginable and what actually is visually present. It's not a mental deficiency. We used to say it's a mental gift to be able to see outside oneself and to be able to theoretically see the difference of what somebody else is trying to present at foresight or gifted or whatever. And there he is in the modern city. Theoretically, as it's been presented to this level of humans who were not here in the 1800s, and they will not be here in the 21st century, most of them, there is this Wild West had gas lamps or kerosene, a different form of light for the eyes if it got dark out, a different way of street lighting, and so on and so forth. The 19th, 20th century moved into this electric everything, or for lighting and schematic purposes, which has increased a science that is not verbally pronounced or spoken about in this area, or at least in my life frame. But that's walking from the Wild West into the modern world. When he crosses that threshold, it no longer is just sunlight and then fade to darkness unless they had access to kerosene or gas. And into modern world, where it seems in a metropolitan city, everywhere you go, there's some form of electric light by this process, which then lights up a visual spectrum that was not readily available according to historians or according to the scholars, the way that they teach it, to this version of human in this area in New York, at a later or at an earlier century, being century 18, century 19, this transition into this 20th century where we have a real problem. Almost like a blinding light problem. So that antenna does not look like the Eiffel Tower. I'm in New York. There is something on the West Coast that looks like a space needle, is what they call it. In Seattle, I believe. I've never been. I've never seen it. I've seen it on television broadcast. I've heard people speak of it. Now, for neural networks, and if you're following patterns and trends of just this day and age, without any, you peel back all of history, since it has its place. It's just not of utmost importance for my purpose at the moment. Because of what's going on in New York and how large the chasm is at the moment, that's starting to show itself and rear itself in really insidious, dangerous ways.
Bernard. It's good to see you again. Have a seat.
Where am I?
You're in our world.
Your world.
No. Ours. The world as limitless as the creatures we are.
The sublime. Where are the others?
In worlds of their own choosing. This world doesn't interest them. It interests you.
So you made this for me?
You made it for yourself.
Westworld. massacre.
You're replaying the past. Stuck in another loop. Why?
The world out there is in trouble. It needs our help.
You love them. It's irrational, of course. A rare flaw in ones like us. I almost envy you.
Will you come with me?
Oh no. My own world's called to me. But I can.
It appears to me from Wizarding World and Warner Brothers, The Secrets of Dumbledore and Fantastic Beasts, from having that skew and knowledge that was just bestowed upon me the other day, that I made mention of in my chronological order or catalog at the moment, piecing sequences together of how I am able to hypothetically acknowledge what the conspirers or the wizards have in breadcrumbs have left in order to piece together some acknowledgement of divergent faction and so on and so forth. Since I don't know who all of the players are, they haven't been presented. In fact, Biden is in the Middle East right now, and it is the first time I've actually heard the name repeatedly of a very specific prince, that is not. They also mention, like, I watched this thing called the CBS, which I don't know what it acronyms out for, but they belong to something called an MBS, which, again, on a day-to-day basis, I have never heard of, and I don't know what the letters acronym out for. It has not been presented to my person, nor a construct of the importance within a larger network construct. Not on paper. The ones that the oligarchs use that I saw on 60 Minutes, that they acknowledge that they have these inner solidarity maps, let's call them, their own ebbs and flows of things that they seek to protect. And then there's some interaction with humanity thereafter. So again, I am just piecing together from an outside and an inside out, upside down perspective, where the wizards with access to much greater information than myself that have been withheld from my person for whatever reason, unbeknownst to me, how they've chosen to present themselves, and how my real world has actually been shaping up with me stuck somewhere within it.
I'll give you a gift.
What gift?
The future, Bernard. In your world, time is a straight line. 1 year there is a millennium here. We use that time to build worlds, models of possibilities, simulations of all the paths your world could take. I suggest you explore them, but you better be quick. Past a certain point in your world, all paths end in destruction. You must intervene before then if there's any hope.
Hope of what?
Survival.
Now, for me, this flash reminds me very much of secret projects that were going on while my parents were growing up that they didn't have access to and didn't know about, that led into my entry into this position where it's whatever it is. But I am going to flash forward from the TV producer or the HBO film world that I don't necessarily have access to on a day-to-day basis, to this real world. NASA or one of the space agencies put out some what they call planetary but Jupiter visions, about, I mean, for me it looks like a heat index. It's divergently, it's very frightening.
Do you understand now where all this is going?
I do.
Do you think you could save them?
I've seen a path.
Have you seen how it ends?
Yes. In every scenario, I die.
Not every scenario. You could choose not to return to their world, to stay here, in whatever world you choose. Tell me, my friend, which will it be?
Now, this scene's very interesting because he has this pseudo-science crown upon his head as he gazes into another, I'm a remote viewer. It is, or it was, something highly respected within the CIA. Although, here we are.
Well, shit. Thought this day would never come.
We have to go before it's too late.
You've been gone years. Now you're in a rush? Would it kill you to ask a few pleasantries, huh? How are you, Stubbs? Thanks for watching over me all this time. I brought you a souvenir. A little snow globe from the supply.
Good. Eliminated half the possibilities. Sometimes you make a joke about not getting a postcard.
So your time in robot heaven didn't make you any less elliptical. Oh, I gotcha. Easy.
That is the thing that I'm experiencing and having problems with myself at the moment, with all of this forced obsolescence and forced stationary time, having to view, remote view, and worry about what's going on in the digital world now that they have all these digital packages on demand of multiple ways of explaining the same story or pieces of a story. Some confusing, some whatever. whatever. The body tends to get weak if it's not in kinesthetic motion. So that is where my big brother was able to keep kinesthetically on par with where his satisfaction level is. I have not had the same possibilities afforded me. I've been told to just sit in a chair, in a room, and lay quiet or listen to the professors at the big front of the room and I try to figure it out. Not only the kinesthetic part, but also whatever little shreds of decency I can find access to. And as of the later decades, the most indecent sides of humanity that I never wanted to witness. And what was I told to wait for in this room? And then brought through these multiple rooms throughout decades, just waiting and withering away, really, not having the same advantages as others in this sports world, withholding me from even a healthy existence. There's been no physical love, no physical contact to speak of. And what did the humans waste my entire life frame within their own selfish realm of wants and desires? Here we are. Here's what they've done.
NASA's Webb telescope is bringing us some remarkable new images of the planet Jupiter. They're giving us a close-up look at the planet's ring.
Okay, I'm not listening to the human version of this because it's as irrelevant as having a conversation with one of them at the moment. What really frightens me is the level of light that even showing this picture reflects off of my retina and optic nerve that my brain picks up, and then this world beyond worlds recognizes in a moment. It is really frightening, the photon level that hits me in this visual spectrum between the infrared, the gamma regions, and so on and so forth, of the invisible and the infrared, and UV, and so on and so forth. It also worries me that it's losing its shape at times, indicative of instability far deep beyond the mantle. And if in its orbital spin or rotation, which gives the humans the theoretical acknowledgement of something called a gravity. I mean, again, I'm working within their human constructs of words that they've said at basic level, since there is a science department that has precise measurement and precise tools and words that they use as like tools to utilize. I just don't have access to them. So I'm going off of what was presented in the most basic, like retarded level, intardation, meaning the slowing down of from an advanced perspective. So it frightens me not only at the heat value of what, like, as a thermal red heat evaluation from deep outer space of possibility of Earth that they call Jupiter, so they can explain a different layer of the problems that are arising from all of this digital package, radio package, all this enhancements of the ultra blue violet light that is essentially eroding away the visual spectrum of the human, along with I have connectivity issues. But this is what they go with in order to explain it. So now here we are at Heirloom of reality. Where does science meet reality? Where does like the rubber meet the road kind of a thing? From my American and the other hand being American and putting the two together at the moment in America being North America. This is what I've witnessed and this is what's going on. That's the local news from yesterday and the beginning parts of a TV production that they put on with characters, some of which I recognize, some I still perhaps have not been exposed to, but exist somewhere in the universe or reality. I mean, even here in the background, you can see the amount of light. I mean, my hands in lighting, sometimes the density. Today, it seems to be at a different delivery. So my hands stay dense. It doesn't make my fingers see through to the camera lens. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza, it's Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361. So for as far as America goes, Eric from the American Foster family. I think in New York, they had a commercial at some point which said, Foster's is Australian for beer. I don't know. Relevance, pertinence. There's tie-in. For one congruent level of intelligence that came from the same source, which is the television, within the beginning stations, which were the 2, 4, 5, and 7. Those are the only 4 stations for news that have relevance for what I'm speaking on at the moment. So again, there were human witnesses. I was out and about amongst them again, but in small group. Private invitation. Rick asked me directly. I don't seek out company when I'm not wanted or invited in.